Inside the council hall of the land of origin, the 8 highest-ranking existences of the cultivator camp, Yuan, Jin, Wu Lan, Ming Huang, Nai Ji Yu, Starlight, Mo Man, and Luo Feng, gathered around a black crystalline round table made from the largest dark realm crystal ever discovered in the infinite primordial space. The treasure was worth several ancestor-level corpses, and 8 chairs made from the same crystal surrounded the table. After sitting down, Luo Feng sensed a space-time formation centered on the table and connected to the entire space-time net. Through it, the lords could sense the 3,600 world groups, including countless source worlds and ordinary worlds, whether intact or destroyed. Yuan welcomed Luo Feng as the cultivator camp's 8th lord, while Jin and Starlight emphasized how difficult it was for the cultivator camp to produce a new lord. Starlight explained that mastering the highest power, the Tao, was far more difficult than becoming an ancestor, which was why ancestors could emerge more easily. The first agenda was the distribution of the war spoils. The cultivator camp had killed 11 ancestors during this war, an unprecedented achievement compared with the 14 ancestors it had killed throughout countless previous eras. Nai Ji Yu explained that Luo Feng's breakthrough had turned the tide. After Luo Feng became a lord and entered the battlefield, 3 ancestors were killed in a short time. Later, after Luo Feng was forcibly captured and separated from his faction, his explosion of 10.8 billion origin indirectly led to the deaths of another 5 ancestors. Luo Feng credited Ming Huang, whose powerful, condensed, and extremely fast thunder attacks had delivered the final blows against many ancestors. The 11 ancestor corpses were divided according to the camp's established rules, with each lord receiving 1/10 and the rest being reserved for the entire cultivator camp. The treasures carried by the ancestors were also divided equally, with the remainder kept by the camp. The war demonstrated that sufficient strength was essential in battles between the 2 major camps. Ancestors had to fight with their true bodies because avatars without a life core were too weak, possessing less than 30% of their full strength. Even Starlight Lord's role was greatly reduced after losing only 3% of his energy reserve. Luo Feng was most effective when his energy reserve was at its peak, allowing him to recover rapidly, fight powerfully in close combat, and unleash terrifying forbidden techniques. If his energy reserve fell too low, all aspects of his strength declined. The ancestors might have defeated his main battle avatar, which had only 20% of its energy reserve remaining, if they had attacked with full strength. Although the victory would have been temporary because the 8 lords could recover and return to battle. Yuan then announced the second agenda, redistributing territory and subordinates after Luo Feng's emergence as a new lord. The Dark World Group, Luo Feng's homeland, became his absolute territory, since every lord had to guard the borders. The 3,600 world groups were redistributed among the 8 lords according to their absolute territories and border responsibilities. The previous lords made minor adjustments based on their long-term investments and important connections, while Luo Feng was willing to accept changes because he had not previously invested much effort in other world groups. The territory division was then finalized without objection. High-level primordial lifeforms were assigned according to territory, while world-level primordials who had a master-disciple relationship with a lord remained under that lord. Those without special relationships were divided according to territory. Luo Feng received 23 world-level primordials, including 20 captured during the war, as well as more than 10 million and 25,000 high-level primordials, including over 8 billion captives. Yuan explained that Luo Feng had slightly fewer cultivator world-level primordials because the other lords had spent countless years cultivating their subordinates, while Luo Feng had only recently become a lord. He suggested that Luo Feng could cultivate more world-level primordials from the younger cultivators within the braided cage and accept some as disciples. Luo Feng agreed to gradually cultivate them in the future. After the allocation was approved, the cultivator camp would notify all world-level primordials and high-level primordial lifeforms, since their authority and responsibilities also had to be reassessed. The third agenda concerned the cultivation of younger generations in the new era. The lords discussed changing the resource system now that the war had ended and the cultivator camp's territories were secure. Mo Man proposed reclaiming many resources that had previously been freely exchanged because countless world groups might have been destroyed during the war, giving cultivators greater opportunities to obtain resources and break free from the braided cage. Now that the territories were secure and many divine emperor-level cultivators possessed endless lifespans, unrestricted resource exchange was no longer sustainable. Naijiu agreed that the camp had to consider its long-term development. While the lords continued their discussions, the new territory and subordinate allocation plans were transmitted throughout the land of origin. Countless cultivators learned that the cultivator camp had produced its eighth lord, Luo Feng, and that the eight lords had completely won the war. Tinlong Ke, Guang Yu, and Kai Feng Taoist also received a summons stating that 23 world-level primordial lifeforms were to proceed to the Sky Moon Sea Cave Mansion and await an audience with Lord Luo Feng. Guang Yu and Kai Feng Taoist were extremely excited to learn that Luo Feng's emergence as a new lord had been kept secret during the war and that the news had only been publicly revealed after the cultivator camp had secured victory. Guang Yu urged Tinlong Ke to hurry because this would be their first audience with Lord Luo Feng. Tinlong Ke was somewhat dazed but immediately set out with his companions. At that moment, he finally began to understand why his own breakthrough had not caused a lord to summon him. Luo Feng had only recently become the cultivator camp's new lord, and his identity had remained secret until the war was over. In the council hall, the lords engaged in a heated debate over how to train the successors of the cultivators. Lord Wulin questioned whether resources should continue to be restricted, but Jin argued that scarcity could force stronger potential to emerge. He cited Yuan, himself, and Luo Feng as examples of powerful beings who had risen despite having few resources. Luo Feng agreed that successors should undergo a poverty-style cultivation method, where resources remain sufficiently scarce and only those capable of reaching the ultimate realm of godly king or becoming half-primordials under such conditions would be considered worthy of further support. Yuan added that Luo Feng's path proved the importance of personal exploration, as Luo Feng had reached the divine emperor stage without any inheritance to guide him. The lords agreed that inheritances capable of breaking out of the braided cage should not be widely spread, allowing successors to explore their own paths. They also agreed that resources in the new era should remain scarce at first and only be provided to successors who demonstrated sufficient excellence. Mo Man noted that 8 lords had emerged from the source world, suggesting that the countless worlds created by the cultivators possessed flaws in innate talent and qualifications. Yuan stated that the worlds they created were fundamentally different from the source world, while Wulin suggested that future resources should be directed more toward the source world because it was the only place with the potential to give birth to new lords. Luo Feng then proposed prohibiting calamity-type cultivators within the cultivator territory, especially those who treated all the creatures of a source world as resources and continuously harvested them across multiple reincarnation eras. Jin and Naijiu objected, identifying themselves as calamity-type cultivators and arguing that every cultivation path had its own meaning. Jin explained that, as a member of the Destruction Demon Clan, he had been influenced by the source world to destroy life, eventually comprehending destruction and becoming a lord. Naijiu stated that all life could serve as resources for his cultivation, including the corpses of ancestors. Jin argued that no cultivation path should be restricted, while Minghuang condemned paths based on overwhelming sin and the destruction of countless lives. Naijiu rejected the concept of sin, claiming that only strength and weakness existed in the infinite primordial space. Luo Feng argued that all life should possess compassion for the weak because everyone had originated from weakness, while Naijiu maintained that the weak being preyed upon by the strong was simply destiny. The lords were divided into different factions. Jin, Naijiu, and Mo Man were generally aligned. Although Mo Man was less extreme, Minghuang and Wulin were considered another faction, with Wulin admiring Minghuang's benevolent nature. Yuan remained inclusive of all viewpoints, while Starlight mainly observed without taking sides. Yuan realized that Luo Feng's arrival had brought the balance between the two major factions closer, making future conflicts more intense. Jin argued that the innate primordial life camp would not pity the weak and that Luo Feng, who cultivated the primordial life and death Dao, should understand that the weak would eventually be destroyed. Luo Feng replied that destruction should exist to protect life. Mo Man argued that harsh environments and catastrophic cultivators could provide powerful motivation for other cultivators to grow, citing the dangers Luo Feng himself had faced in his youth, including the golden-horned giant beast and later the sector beast. Luo Feng clarified that the true calamity-type cultivators that should be opposed were those capable of destroying all the creatures within a source world. Because weaker cultivators would have no chance to resist them. Yuan eventually ended the dispute and reaffirmed the existing rules. Each lord could implement their own ideas within their own absolute territory, while the other vast regions of the cultivator territory would continue following a free-range strategy. If persuasion failed, strength would determine the outcome, and a decision would be followed only if one lord could defeat the combined efforts of the others. Since no one in the infinite primordial space could accomplish that, the lords had to seek common ground while preserving their differences. Luo Feng realized that becoming a lord did not allow him to freely impose his own rules, as even the cultivator camp required decisions to be made together with the other lords. Yuan then announced that a grand celebration should be held for the birth of a new lord, as was customary, but Luo Feng proposed reclaiming the cultivator territory's 3,600 world groups first, many of which had not yet been reclaimed. The lords agreed, and Yuan made the reclamation of the territory their next priority. Although the lords had internal disagreements, they remained united against external enemies. And even Jin and Naijiu understood how much the cultivator camp had helped them. A complete reclamation plan was soon formulated, with tasks assigned among the 8 lords. In the land of origin, outside Luo Feng's Sky Moon Sea Cave mansion, more than 10 million high-level primordial beings and 23 world-level primordial beings gathered excitedly to meet him. The Dark World Group, once inconspicuous, had now become Luo Feng's homeland and absolute territory, causing its inhabitants to expect immense prosperity and greater opportunities in the future. Tian Lang Ke, the only world-level primordial being born in the Dark World Group, was especially viewed by his companions as someone who would be heavily utilized by Luo Feng and might even obtain one of the 3 main inspector positions. However, some noted that Tian Lang Ke had not attended Luo Feng's first visit to the land of origin when more than 10,000 high-level primordial beings from the same world group had gone to pay their respects. Suddenly, an invisible wave descended, causing all 23 world-level primordial beings and more than 10 million high-level primordial beings to fall silent under the terrifying aura. Luo Feng then descended from the void in black attire with black hair. Tian Lang Ke saw his lord for the first time and understood that, as a world-level primordial being born within Luo Feng's absolute territory, he would remain under Luo Feng's command for endless years. All 23 world-level primordial beings and more than 10 million high-level primordial beings respectfully greeted Lord Luo Feng. And only by facing his true body did they fully comprehend the immense gap between themselves and a lord. Luo Feng gazed at the 23 world-level primordial beings and more than 10 million high-level primordial lives under his command. In the future, these subordinates would be responsible for managing his vast territory, which contained numerous source worlds, billions of ordinary worlds, and naturally nurtured treasure mines. Since the cultivator camp lacked enough high-level primordial lives, it had to rely on the innate primordial lives who had submitted to manage the territory. Luo Feng told his subordinates that this was their first meeting and that they could report important matters directly to him in the future. Among them were Chu Zhe and Yifeiya, who had once guarded the dark sacred realm. They were astonished that Luo Feng had become a lord in less than 2,000 epochs. The last time they had guided him, he had only been a half-primordial fusion Dao cultivator, but he had now reached the highest level of Dao mastery and possessed terrifying power and authority. Luo Feng then ordered the 23 world-level primordials and Cheng to remain while the other high-level primordial lives departed. The remaining subordinates followed him into the depths of the cave mansion, where he explained that the war between the cultivator camp and the innate primordial life camp had just ended, leaving many territories fallen and requiring recovery. Luo Feng appointed 4 directions commanders and 19 guardian generals, assigning responsibilities throughout the cultivator territory. Tinlongqi, a newly advanced world-level primordial of relatively low strength, became one of the 19 guardian generals. Luo Feng then announced that his territories would be divided into 3 domains, each managed by an inspector. Cheng Shi became the first domain inspector, Zhu Huo the second, and Guan Yu the third. Cheng Shi was originally a fusion Dao cultivator who had refined bloodlines to become a world-level primordial and was one of the strongest combatants under Luo Feng. Zhu Huo was the weakest of the 3 and was only at the late stage of the world-level primordial realm. but he had previously performed well as an inspector. Guang Yu had reached the perfection level and was second only to Cheng Shi in strength among Luo Feng's subordinates. Luo Feng selected them primarily because they had proven themselves highly capable at handling affairs. Zhu Huo was relieved to be chosen. Realizing that Luo Feng valued ability and practical performance more than differences in cultivation level. Tinlongqi was disappointed at not being selected, but he understood the reason. He had been arrogant and had previously refused to visit Luo Feng even when many high-level primordial lives from their hometown had done so. Luo Feng considered Tinlongqi unsuitable for an inspection position because he looked down on weaker beings and lacked sympathy for the weak. While an inspector had to oversee more than 100 world groups and countless primordial lives. Luo Feng then assigned Cheng to manage the construction of the Dark World Group, which was his absolute territory, and to lead many high-level primordial lives in handling the detailed construction work. Luo Feng explained that 93 world groups in his territory remained in ruins. 65 world groups occupied by the innate primordial life camp would be quickly reclaimed by the lords, while the remaining 28 had been invaded by the Blood Crane territory and Omimo's forces. Luo Feng ordered Cheng Shi to visit the Blood Crane territory and demand the return of the occupied world groups, and Guang Yu to deliver the same demand to Omimo. If either force refused, they were to return without arguing, leaving the subsequent matters to Luo Feng. The 8 lords had already determined how the fallen territories would be recovered. The territories occupied by the innate primordial life camp would be reclaimed easily because its ancestors were no longer willing to continue fighting. The Ice Peak camp, which occupied more than 100 world groups, would be dealt with later by all 8 lords together. 11 other forces would be given the opportunity to withdraw voluntarily. But if they refused, war would begin. Although some of these forces lacked seats in the Land of Eternity, they were not necessarily weak. Omimo, for example, had once been among the 3 strongest camps in the infinite primordial space, though its strength had later been reduced to only around 1/10 or 2/10 of its former power after being defeated by the innate primordial life camp. Luo Feng hoped that the Blood Crane territory in Omimo would understand the situation and withdraw. Later, in the Land of Origin source world within the Dark World Group, Xu Xin stood above Huyang City and was astonished by the flourishing world. After Luo Feng mastered the source world of his homeland, Xu Xin became like a child of the world, immune to threats and capable of wielding a portion of the source world's origin power. She was shocked when Luo Feng revealed that he had reached the highest level among cultivators and had become a lord. Luo Feng then summoned Morosa, who was equally shocked by Xu Xin's transformation, because he knew that she had once been too weak to survive in the environment of the Land of Origin. Yet she now possessed power capable of crushing him. Luo Feng explained that because he had mastered the source world, Morosa had escaped the fate of dying together with the self-destruction of the source world. Even if Morosa died, Luo Feng could resurrect him. Luo Feng then revealed that within the source world of his homeland, he could now resurrect beings inside the braided cage, making it necessary to establish a resurrection list. Luo Feng intended to personally create the list, while his wife Xu Xin, Luo Peng, Luo Hai, and his closest relatives could determine another list representing his family. The primordial ancestor, primal chaos city lord, Hong, Thunder Lord, and True Inference King could lead the humanity side of the primordial cosmos in creating its own list. Morosa, Master Emperor Chu, and Master Mountain Sitting Guest could represent another force and draft a separate list. While Emperor Cheng, Emperor Meng, Di Fu, Moyu Qingyan, Emperor Chu Yu, and others would also have the right to provide advice. In the future, the Land of Origin source world would need to maintain a balance among the 3 sides. Xu Xin asked whether everyone could obtain eternal life after resurrection, and Luo Feng confirmed that they could, with no limit on the number he could resurrect. Xu Xin recognized that unlimited resurrection could seriously disrupt order, so she proposed establishing a threshold. Luo Feng explained that he would create a separate new primordial cosmos for those resurrected from the primordial cosmos. They would possess eternal life and be favored by the rules, but they would still have to cultivate from the start traveler level step by step. Only those capable of cultivating to the true god of void space realm and passing through reincarnation to enter the Land of Origin would achieve that through their own ability. This arrangement would allow the resurrection list to be greatly expanded. including many innocent lives who had died during the golden horned giant beast calamity. However, those who had committed heinous crimes or betrayed humanity would not qualify. Luo Feng also stated that if a resurrected individual were killed again, he could grant another resurrection, but the requirements would be much stricter. For the land of origin, Luo Feng assigned Emperor Chu and Mountain Sitting Guest, together with Morosa, to handle the resurrection list, emphasizing that the selection had to be even more cautious because resurrecting beings from the land of origin consumed far more resources. Xu Xin then went to find Luo Peng, the true manager of the Luo family. While Luo Feng also departed, Morosa was left wondering about Luo Feng's true realm, realizing that Luo Feng might have reached the level of the Source World Master. Since only such an existence was rumored to be capable of resurrecting all lives within a Source World, Luo Feng himself had already prepared a resurrection list. He intended to resurrect those who had supported him during his journey, those who had shown him kindness, and the people most important to them, including the former Firehammer Squad, the teacher who had once taught him, comrades who had fought alongside him in the wilderness zone, and companions who had died during the golden horned giant beast catastrophe. For those who had shown him kindness, Luo Feng would also provide resources to help them cultivate. Luo Feng then visited his teacher, Mountain Sitting Guest, who had been living in seclusion in a small town on the land of origin and focusing on artifact refinement. Luo Feng revealed that he had cultivated to an extremely high realm and could now resurrect every creature that had ever been born within the source world of the origin continent, as long as they had never escaped the braided cage. This included Mountain Sitting Guest's friends and family. Mountain Sitting Guest was overwhelmed by the revelation and asked how many people could be resurrected. Luo Feng allowed him to prepare a list of up to 10,000 individuals. Mountain Sitting Guest quickly finalized the list, which included his former teacher, fellow disciples, friends who had shared life and death with him, and the person he had loved throughout his life. Luo Feng immediately resurrected all 10,000 people, bringing them from the past timeline into the present, because the rules of the origin world now operated with Luo Feng's will as their core. The usual time-space backlash that would erase such resurrections did not occur. Mountain Sitting Guest saw the 10,000 resurrected figures appear before him, most of whom had died during the destruction of Jin State, while others had died even earlier. Their memories remained at the moment of their deaths, so they were confused and did not understand what had happened. Mountain Sitting Guest moved toward his senior sister, while Luo Feng smiled and left, allowing his teacher to reunite privately with his resurrected friends and family. Meanwhile, at the border of the cultivator territory, Lord Luo Feng ordered the patrollers Cheng Shi and Guang Yu to meet the forces of the Blood Crane territory and Omimo respectively. Guang Yu discovered that the Omimo force had completely withdrawn from the 12 world groups it had occupied. Although Omimo had taken many resources, it had not caused significant damage to the origin worlds or the millions of other worlds. Guang Yu noted that the Omimo force was extremely cautious and had immediately retreated after the war between the two camps ended. The two surviving ancient beings of Omimo, despite their decline, remained extremely powerful and possessed strong life-saving abilities. They were not absolutely undying, but they were very difficult to kill and always chose to flee whenever the situation became unfavorable rather than fight to the death. Guang Yu was pleased and prepared to report the situation to Luo Feng. Cheng Shi, however, encountered a different situation when he met the Blood Crane territory force. The Blood Crane territory was far more domineering, with its leader refusing to speak to a mere world-level primordial being and demanding that Luo Feng come personally. Cheng Shi angrily declared that even the innate primordial life camp had ultimately lost against them, and that his master had shown mercy by giving the Blood Crane territory the chance to withdraw voluntarily. He warned that he would report their attitude truthfully. In response, the Blood Crane territory leader contemptuously destroyed Cheng Shi's avatar with a single cold snort. Even as his avatar turned to dust, Cheng Shi continued to glare coldly at the distant shadow. The Blood Crane territory leader remained completely unafraid, believing that Luo Feng could not simply demand the return of the territory they had occupied. In the land of origin source world, Flame, Wind and Thunder emerged from seclusion after learning that Luo Feng had become a lord, the highest level of existence in the infinite primordial space. They had just witnessed a large group of high-level primordial life forms descend into the dark sacred realm. where Cheng publicly announced that the entire Dark World group had become the absolute territory of the newly born Lord Luo Feng. The two ancient country ancestors were deeply shocked. The last time Luo Feng had summoned them, he had only been a half-primordial fusion path cultivator, and they had merely believed that he might escape the braided cage. They had never expected him to become the greatest existence in the infinite primordial space. After realizing that the land of origin source world was Luo Feng's homeland and that the entire Dark World group was his territory, Flame, Wind and Thunder understood that they no longer had the qualification to establish ancient countries and occupy such vast territories. Their ancient countries had mainly been established to obtain resources, and now Luo Feng himself had become the greatest opportunity. Therefore, they immediately went to Huyang City to visit Morosa and express their willingness to offer their ancient countries and serve Luo Feng. Morosa was surprised that they already knew about Luo Feng's breakthrough. Thunder explained that the high-level primordial life forms had publicly announced Luo Feng's authority over the entire Dark World group, making them feel extremely honored as members of his homeland source world. Morosa then explained that Luo Feng would soon completely transform the entire land of origin. If the two ancient countries did not voluntarily offer themselves, they would eventually cease to exist. Flame, Wind and Thunder obediently accepted this. Morosa could not promise them much, but he pointed out a possible path through Emperor Chu, Luo Feng's teacher. He explained that Luo Feng's subordinates were divided into three major factions: the Luo family and Earthlings faction, the primordial cosmos human faction, and the land of origin faction centered around Morosa, Emperor Chu, and mountain-sitting guest. Flame, Wind and Thunder could not even enter the secondary core of these factions. Emperor Chu Yu, Emperor Cheng, Di Fu, and Emperor Ming all had good relationships with Luo Feng. But Flame, Wind and Thunder had failed to establish such connections. Flame Wind deeply regretted having underestimated Luo Feng's potential in the past and only realizing his importance after Luo Feng no longer needed his help. Thunder was even more remorseful because no one from the Thunder ancient country had maintained a close relationship with Luo Feng. Morosa finally told them to act wisely and dismissed them. They obediently left, realizing that without their connections to Emperor Chu and Emperor Chu Yu, they might not even have been qualified to meet Morosa. Meanwhile, within the land of origin source world and the endless universe ocean, Luo Feng gazed toward the deepest 3,000 primordial cosmoses. With a thought, new primordial cosmoses began to nurture within the original time and space, eventually reaching as many as 100,000. Luo Feng allowed most of them to evolve naturally, while specially guiding one primordial cosmos adjacent to the galaxy's sacred land universe. This primordial cosmos was prepared to serve as a residence for resurrected beings. The Luo family and the primordial cosmos human clan had already determined their resurrection lists, while Morosa, Emperor Chu, and mountain-sitting guest had only just begun organizing the resurrection of beings from the land of origin. Luo Feng then began the resurrection process, restoring entire galaxies and countless lives from the river of time and space. The Milky Way, the solar system, and the blue planet were restored, while dead war gods, war generals, warriors, families, friends, former heroes, members of the Firehammer Squad, and relatives who had died during the Grand Nirvana period were resurrected one after another. The Earthlings from Luo Feng's era had the lowest resurrection threshold, and as long as they were not major criminals, they were all revived. Because these beings had died at different times, people from completely different eras were brought back into the same new era. A grandfather, father, and son could therefore be resurrected together even though the son might appear older than the father and grandfather. Depending on when each had died, other groups faced much higher resurrection thresholds. Even ordinary members of the Luo family were not necessarily resurrected, while the vast primordial cosmos human clan had an even stricter standard. Only extremely brilliant geniuses, heroes with outstanding contributions, important pillars of the human race, and their valued friends and relatives were brought back. Giant Axe was also resurrected. He appeared in a primordial cosmos and was extremely confused because he clearly remembered that his soul had been completely obliterated. The surrounding environment seemed familiar, like the primordial cosmos he had known, but there was no virtual universe and many planets had no living beings. Giant Axe then tore open the membrane of the primordial cosmos and flew out. He was stunned when he saw numerous enormous primordial cosmoses in the distance, including the galaxy Sacred Land universe. Within his visible range, he counted 28 primordial cosmoses and realized that he had entered a completely unfamiliar era. Soon, familiar figures including Primordial Ancestor, Primal Chaos City Lord, Peng Gong, Dark, Deserted Mirror, Long Sheng, and Han arrived. Giant Axe was shocked to discover that some of them were only divine power incarnations yet were already far stronger than him. Primal Chaos City Lord happily welcomed him to the new era. Luo Feng then turned his attention to the land of origin itself. An ownerless source world could only evolve according to instinct, resulting in extremely low energy utilization efficiency. So Luo Feng decided that the land of origin was still too small. He expanded its land into the universe ocean, drawing in endless energy and transforming it into vast territory. Eventually, the land of origin expanded by 100-fold. 99% of the universe ocean became energy deserts, while enough energy was preserved to maintain 10,000 primordial cosmoses. Luo Feng completely transformed the appearance of the land of origin and was satisfied with the result. The source world origin possessed extremely abundant energy, even exceeding land's energy reserves. More than 99% of a source world's energy was stored within its origin, which remained undamaged even through repeated destruction and rebirth. Therefore, maintaining a 100-fold land of origin and 10,000 primordial cosmoses placed only a light burden on the source world origin, allowing most of its energy to remain available for nurturing life. Luo Feng realized that a source world with an owner could nurture 100 times more life than an ownerless source world. At this moment, Cheng Shi reported that the Blood Crane territory had refused to return the territory it had occupied, acted maliciously, and directly destroyed his avatar. Luo Feng frowned after receiving the report. The long-established Omimo influence had obediently withdrawn from his territory. Yet the younger Blood Crane territory had acted even more domineeringly. Luo Feng was angered that they dared to behave so brazenly within the Cultivator territory. In his view, only the innate Primordial Life Camp and the Ice Peak Camp were qualified to be true opponents of the Cultivator Camp. As for the Blood Crane territory, he did not consider it significant. Wanting to see its true strength, Luo Feng immediately sent his main battle avatar out from his homeland source world and headed directly toward the border. The time-space of the infinite primordial space was extremely fragile before Luo Feng, allowing him to easily tear open time travel passages with his highest level life and death power. He quickly left the origin world of the origin continent and the entire Dark World Group. World groups were prosperous regions containing many source worlds and nurturing countless innate primordial lifeforms, while the vast areas between them were largely desolate. Compared with the ancestors, Luo Feng's traveling speed was extremely fast, though it was still far inferior to Starlight, which could transcend time and space. While traveling, Luo Feng considered the Blood Crane territory a relatively small force nurtured by a mysterious land. Its three strongest beings were the ancestor-level Blood Lord, Crane Lord, and Shadow Lord, while the other creatures were weaker primordial lifeforms. The infinite primordial space contained many ancient existences and forces that did not belong to the innate primordial camp. Some, such as Moman, remained completely detached, while others, like Initial, joined the innate primordial camp. Mysterious lands had also nurtured powerful clans, including the Blood Crane Territory Clan, Feather Realm Clan, Giant God Race, and Infinite Great Serpent Clan. The latter two had become the two holy lands of the innate primordial camp, while the former two had not joined it. The Infinite Great Serpent Clan relied on the innate primordial camp to contend with the Cultivator camp because it needed source world origins, while the Giant God Race required other resources since relying only on primordial force was too slow. Luo Feng believed that forcibly uniting all these forces would have caused internal conflict long ago. After more than 10 days, Luo Feng reached the border of the Cultivator territory and locked onto the Shadow Lord through life sensing. The Shadow Lord had occupied 16 world groups and arrogantly questioned whether the 8 Cultivator Lords were being too greedy by occupying 3,600 world groups. He even claimed that he was helping the Cultivator camp by provoking the innate primordial camp into attacking it. Luo Feng then used his realm of life and death to crush the surrounding space-time and force the Shadow Lord's hidden body to reveal itself. Luo Feng demanded that the Shadow Lord surrender all the resources seized from the Cultivator territory, provide 3 times that amount as compensation, and promise never to offend the cultivator territory again. The Shadow Lord refused, declaring that 16 world groups were too few and that he would instead take 32. He threatened to repeatedly invade and rob the cultivator territory. Confident in his powerful life-saving methods, Luo Feng immediately attacked. A billion blade lights erupted from his body, all locking onto the Shadow Lord through life sensing. Although the Shadow Lord could transform into a shadow, merge with spacetime, and conceal himself within all things, Luo Feng's blade lights followed his life chi mechanism and annihilated his life composition. The Shadow Lord could not escape and was forced to merge his life forces. Luo Feng then locked onto him and struck with a terrifying slash that pierced through his chest and completely annihilated his body. However, Luo Feng discovered that the Shadow Lord had not carried his life core. Some ancestor-level existences hid their life cores in extremely secret locations and used avatars with only part of their full strength. Even a fraction of an ancestor's strength was enough to dominate all beings below the ancestor level. The life cores of the 3 lords of the Blood Crane territory were hidden deep within the Blood Crane territory, and no one had ever found them. The Shadow Lord soon created another avatar and demanded that Luo Feng return his treasures. Threatening to continue attacking the cultivator territory, Luo Feng refused and stated that since no one had ever found the Shadow Lord's life core, he wanted to try eliminating him completely. The Shadow Lord remained confident in the power of the Blood Crane territory and challenged Luo Feng to come. Luo Feng understood that destroying one avatar was not enough, so he decided to attack the Shadow Lord's true lair. He tore open a spacetime passage, left the cultivator territory, and headed directly toward the distant Blood Crane territory.